We can talk about the pass rush and playing more man coverage and press and all that fun, sexy stuff. But this new Packers defense only works if the big boys up front do their job.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how, thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We've talked about the man coverage, the press, all of the fun coverage stuff, Xavier McKinney and how the post-safety play is going to unlock this defense. We've talked about Jair Alexander and the secondary and all this stuff. Rashawn Gary, the guy who's going to benefit most from this defense. But this defense works best when you have some big, rugged dudes in the middle of it. And the 49ers made a clear choice. They could have kept Eric Armstead instead of Javon Hargrave, but they went out in free agency and spent a boatload on Javon Hargrave, and a year later let Eric Armstead walk. In fact, didn't just let him walk, sent him packing. They decided he was more important because his ability to not just eat up blocks, which he does, but also create penetration into the backfield from a nose tackle position is vital in this defense. And it frees up opportunities for the other guys in this front. And one of the big reasons that the Houston defense is not where it could be is because they don't have one of those guys. Now, they added Danico Autry, they added Danielle Hunter, but they needed just like edge rush juice, and then you can start building. And that's what the 49ers did too. You draft Nick Bosa, you sign D Ford, and then you go out and you get someone like they traded DeForest Buckner, but that was for money reasons. They didn't want to pay him. And then you go out and you sign Javon Hargrave. You look at what the Jets are doing with Robert Saleh. And Quinnen Williams is the reason that all works. Like, not just Quinnen Williams, not just what the edge rushers can do, what they were able to get last year out of, undersized, pass rush only kinds of players. Quincy Williams becomes an all-pro. CJ Mosley revitalizes his career, in part because you have a player in Quinnen Williams who can just wreck shop. And for the Packers, we have just not talked enough about what TJ Slaton means to this team. The fact that this is not Devontae Wyatt and Kenny Clark, because Devontae Wyatt's playing the 3 technique and Kenny Clark is playing the nose. That's just not what this defense is going to look like. TJ Slaton, at least based on the early indications, based on what we've seen, he is the nose tackle. He's going to be the block eater. And that frees up Kenny Clark to do a lot of other things. And he was really good at this, Slaton was, last year. In fact, he was the second highest graded one tech in the NFL last year, only behind Dexter Lawrence, who currently is the best nose tackle going. And now that Aaron Donald is retired, maybe the best interior defensive lineman going in the NFL right now. That's how good TJ Slaton was last year. And this evolution, and based on some of the conversations that I've had, based on the early training camp, or I guess it's not training camp, OTAs, Kenny Clark is going to play a more full-time, three-technique kind of role, where it's attack upfield. It's not eating blocks, it's beating blocks. That's a huge difference. It's not read and react, it's go make a play. And you go back and you go last year. Kenny Clark aligned over the A gap. So for those of you unfamiliar with gaps, A, B, C as you move out, starts in the middle. Clark aligned over the A gap on 44 snaps, not 44%, 44 snaps last year, according to Pro Football Focus. What do you, just in your brain, in your mind, think of what you think, 44 snaps over 17 games. Okay, do the math. Okay, so less than 3 a game. Think of what you think Kenny Clark's previous low was. It's 130. He played less nose tackle last year than he has ever played by far. By far. It's not a coincidence that his best in terms of productivity pass rush season ever was last year, because he played a role where that was the case. And oh my God, he was able to be healthier. He was able to be productive into the end of the season. And he was excellent from start to finish. Not having to lean on 2 300 plus guys every snap, but more often getting to play just one. Wow, that creates a lot more opportunities for Kenny Clark. Amazing how that worked. He lined up over 251 times over the tackle. Over the tackle. That was also a career high, and it's not even really that close. And when he does that, the other thing that allows him to do is now you can run games. So if you're lined up rather than on the nose, it becomes much harder to run a game when you have to get all the way back outside. That becomes really difficult. But if you're lined up as a 5 technique and you're over the tackle, well, then that becomes much easier for you to try and run the arc. And now Rashawn Gary or Lucas Van Ness or Preston Smith or someone else is coming inside to create that confusion with the offensive line. TJ Slaton is one of those players who is just never going to get enough credit for what he does. And when the Packers took him, like I remember Justice Mosqueda, who knows ball, was like, I don't know, man, maybe he's a guard. Like seriously, that was the conversation. Now, how much of that was a bit and how much of that was real, look, with Justice, you never know. We love Justice here. It's not a shade on him at all. But you never know. But he was not expected to be someone who's going to come in and be a meaningful part of your starting lineup. And not just a meaningful part of, at this point now, because of what it does to free up Kenny Clark, it is an enormous part of what you do. And when you look at a defense like the 49ers, where you actually prioritized the player playing that position over the guy playing Kenny Clark's position, because Eric Armstead, playing more inside as a pass rusher, especially. I think that is telling us something about where this team wants to be. And part of that is, your run defense needs to get better, and we know that. Like, that's not news to anyone who's followed this team for more than 15 seconds. But TJ Slaton is going to be a big part of this defense, and if he goes down, and that means Kenny Clark has to play the nose because they don't really have it's TJ Slaton and Kenny Clark, and that's it. Now, that's fine because if you have to move Kenny to nose tackle, you've got Devontae Wyatt, you've got Carl Brooks, you've got Kobe Woodland. Like, you've got guys that can make this all work. But, I don't know, in a perfect world, you'd have a little bit more depth there. That means a lot is riding on TJ Slayton, not just being good, but being healthy. And when he got the chance last year, he was good. So this defense has a chance to be good. We've talked about it, and I can't wait to see it. I really can't. I want to flip sides of the ball. And I want to talk about this offense. And there's this troubling stat about Christian Watson and all the interceptions that Jordan Love threw to him. Well, throwing at him. I'm not that troubled. I'll explain why. Next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more. You can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. It is really fun to bet baseball. You can bet home runs. You can bet strikeouts. You can bet run lines. You can bet all kinds of fun stuff with baseball. And if you're in Wisconsin, you're a Brewers fan, you got plenty of fun stuff to bet on. Let's say we got a lot of listeners in Chicago, Bears fans and Packers fans. Hi, Bears fans. Cubs, plenty of stuff to gamble on if, season's not going the way you'd hoped with Craig Counsell. I don't know. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're going to talk about these interception numbers. We need to clear some things up here. But are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So this stat has been making the rounds lately, that 6 of Jordan Love's 12 interceptions have been thrown to, or were in the direction of Christian Watson. And you can probably think of a number of them just off the top of your head. The game loser against the Raiders, 2 against the Steelers, including the one at the end of the game, which barely counts. These are not like there was a deep shot one against the Lions where it's like, what are you doing? Like that was just a bad decision, a bad throw. And I've heard some takes. There's always takes about this. And it's proof, Christian Watson. I actually think in a lot of ways, the opposite of even the intuitive narrative here is true. The Packers and Jordan Love, and it's really driven by Jordan Love because he ultimately is the one making the decision to throw the ball, is displaying confidence in Christian Watson to go win even when he's covered. And so, okay, Christian Watson, not wide open. Here's a chance to go win. And early in the season, there were more of those, just like 50-50 balls, throw it up, let him see what you can do. And, underthrew the one against the Raiders against Amik Robertson, who's 5'8", and Christian Watson's 6'4". And it's like, just please give Christian a chance. And he didn't. Now, Christian Watson didn't come back to the ball. And, there's his family has some takes on that. Sure, I'm on Twitter somewhere, I'm positive. The Steelers one is another one where I was like, I would like to see him come back to the ball and fight a little harder for that, but it was an underthrown throw. So there's only so much that can fall at the feet of the receiver, but they were trying to get him the ball. I'm sure the Vikings, There were a couple where he's open and Jordan Love just misses him. The Rams, there was one where he's open and Jordan Love just misses him. But their continued insistence on getting him the ball, that's the most important part to me. And when you think about the second half of the season, the first play of the game against Detroit, deep ball, Christian Watson, bang. Slot fade, Christian Watson, touchdown. The Steelers, even right before that, in that same game where he throws 2 interceptions, throwing to Christian Watson, on third down, one of the first drives of the game, he's covered. And Love just dots him up. It's a perfect throw. Into a tight window, into tight coverage. Watson makes the play, Love makes the throw. That sort of confidence, like that's the kind of stuff, not to do everything as a comparison to Aaron Rodgers, but when you have faith in a receiver, you will make throws to that player even when they're not wide open. Like Rodgers, even to guys that were not great players, like Allen Lazard. Love Allen Lazard, but not a great player. That shows belief in that player. The Packers, Jordan Love, they have supreme belief in the ability of Christian Watson. And you go a week after that Lions game, Chiefs game. One of the best throws of Jordan Love's life. One of the best plays of the season. High and outside, into tight window coverage in the end zone. Jordan Love with an absolute dime. But you have to trust Christian to go make the play. And he did, and it's a touchdown, and you're like, it's the Leo meme. It's the point meme. Like that's the reason why Christian Watson remains, even with the injuries and some of the inconsistencies that are there. That's why he remains the guy in this passing game, because he can do things these other guys they just can't do. And the Packers, that's not just me saying that. The Packers, Jordan Love, they clearly believe that too. I don't see it as a bad thing that half of the interceptions that Jordan Love threw in his season, because 12 is not that many, were to your best receiver or the guy that you think is your best receiver. Like I would guess, Aaron Rodgers didn't throw a lot of interceptions, but I would guess the ones that he did throw were thrown into coverage, throwing to Davante Adams. You can think of the 49ers playoff game, for example. Forcing the ball to Davante when you have a receiver wide open in the middle of the field, Allen Lazard. But you're giving your guy a chance. That's what you do. That's what quarterbacks do. Especially when you have a receiver that you have supreme confidence in. And I think I understand from the outside looking in, you go, okay, this team, there's some inconsistencies here, and the hamstring injury, and we don't know what the future of that is, and can he sustain this level of play? When he gets out there against the Lions and the Chiefs, he's just awesome, and it's like, okay, but can he sustain it? And the answer is probably not, but the team is telling us how they feel. I used to work in TV news, and I had a superintendent once. I was doing a story on schools, and I had a superintendent tell me that students vote with their feet. If you're not engaging them, they don't show up. They vote with their feet. Quarterbacks vote with their arm. The quarterback knows where the ball should go. They know what receiver should be trusted. They know what places, or at least they're telling us what they believe to be true. This receiver is the dude. When I need a play made and no one's open, I'm throwing to this guy. The Packers are telling us, Jordan Love is telling us that Christian Watson is that dude. Now, can they pay that off? Can that be the real? Is that warranted? I would love for Christian Watson to be healthy, play 17 games and show us, because he has that ability. He has that ability. let's see it put all together. Now, this offense has the ability, but right now they're being undervalued. And I think I know why. We'll discuss next on Locked On Packers. Our pal Marcus Mosher over at Locked On Cowboys also writes for the 33rd team, and he did a list of top offensive cores. And it was based on QB1, RB1, wide receiver 1, and tight end 1. So your core. So understanding, we're not talking about depth. But I think this is all too often the way that this is discussed. Oh, the Packers don't have that alpha number 1 receiver. They don't have a good core. Oh, they don't have an elite tight end. Oh, they don't have an elite running back. Josh Jacobs is a really good player and 2 years ago was the best running back in the league. But he doesn't have the same sort of hype. Like the Bills were on this list. And I don't want to fall down the rabbit hole of like critiquing the list, but like the Bills are Josh Allen and the Josh Allenettes. I mean, there's Dalton Kincaid had a nice rookie season, but like I would take Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft over Dalton Kincaid. And this is why the whole conceit is wrong. Like tight end 1, okay, cool. But what if you have 2 tight ends and they combine to be better than your 1? Or what if you're a team that has 1 really good receiver and nothing else? Is that better or worse than a team like the Packers that has 5 receivers that they feel really good about? At the very least 4. Like that's why these sorts of exercises, and this is not a shot at Marcus. You know, you get assigned things in this business and you got to do them, and I get it. But this is why I think Green Bay is being undervalued right now. Because they don't have a receiver that is going to like make anyone go nuts in fantasy. Like they're not going to have that guy that goes for $50 at your fantasy auction or goes in the first or second round. They're just not. Unless someone reaches for Josh Jacobs. And even Josh Jacobs, not exactly a sexy pick because you don't know what the backfield split is going to be like. How much is A.J. Dillon going to do? How much is Marshawn Lloyd going to do? But we're talking about cores. We're talking about everybody. Like there's absolutely no way. And I understand Mike Tannenbaum, like the quarterback thing. He said he would take Jordan Love over Josh Allen or be fine taking Jordan Love over Josh Allen. Even if that's not true, and to me personally, it's not true, but I would take Josh Allen over Jordan Love. But then if you say, would you rather have Josh Allen, James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, or I could have Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, forget the rest of the running backs, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs. I'm taking the Packers group because I don't think the difference between Josh Allen and Jordan Love is so much to overcome the fact that the Bills receivers, they're just guys. And we'll see if Keon Coleman is like an NFL player, but we haven't seen him play a snap. And James Cook is not better than Josh Jacobs. Not better than Josh Jacobs was 2 years ago anyway. Then you add in A.J. Dillon, Marshawn Lloyd, like, come on. That's shenanigans. So if we're going to talk about offensive cores, like it doesn't make sense to just talk about the guy at the top because we know offenses are so much more than that. The Packers offense, Matt LaFleur has talked about how much he likes being able to say, okay, this week it's this week it's this game, this play. Play to play, down to down, it might be different, not just game to game, matchup to matchup. And that's a really good, when you have that sort of depth, that is essential unless you have someone like Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, like the best of the best players. You need that depth. In fact, Pro Football Focus did a study. And in the playoffs, they found wide receiver 3 grade was more closely correlated to playoff game wins than wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. That having depth at receiver was more important than having elite talent at the top. You want to win in the postseason, you better have depth. Think of the 2 most important plays of the game-losing drive defensively for the Packers. One went to Chris Connolly, who's like wide receiver 4, and one went to Juwan Jennings, who's wide receiver 3. If one of those 2 plays doesn't happen, the Packers might have been in the Super Bowl. Might have won the Super Bowl. Who knows? Depth. The 49ers aren't just the superstars. They're not just Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. They're Juwan Jennings. They're Chris Connolly. They're Kyle Juszczyk. They have depth. Now the Chiefs don't, because they don't have starters that are good. But they have Patrick Mahomes, they have Andy Reid, and they have Travis Kelce. Like, they're just different than everyone else. And if you want to take the Packers proxy and Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and all those things, then if you're an Aaron Rodgers fan, you might not want to pull on that thread too hard, because you might not find how much cloth you have at the end. Just saying. But this is why the Packers are not viewed the same way, because they don't have the top guy. But they've got a 3 running back group in that room that's as good as any team in the league. I would put the 4 receivers that they have up there with any 4 that any other team has. Now, the 49ers, they've got 3, like 2 awesome, 1 really good, and then it doesn't really matter. Like, it sounds like Ricky Pearsall is having a nice little preseason rookie season. Like, there's that one. There aren't that many other teams that have the 4 depth 1 through 4 at receiver that the Packers do. There are teams that have better number 1s, teams that have better number 2s. But like, if Dontavian Wicks is wide receiver 3, if Romeo Doubs is wide receiver 4, how many teams can match that? There might not be any. Like Dontavian Wicks, let's say Dontavian Wicks, just for the sake of argument, is wide receiver 3. Let's say it's Christian Watson. It's one of those 2, let's say. Aren't they better than any wide receiver 3 you can think of? I'd rather have either one of those guys than Juwan Jennings, and I think Juwan Jennings is a hell of a player. Do you know who the 3rd receiver in Houston is? The answer is no, you do not. Do you know who the 3rd receiver in Miami is? They got 2 great ones. What do they have after that? You don't know. The Eagles have 2 great ones. Do you know who's after that? No, you don't. Because they don't have the depth. These things matter come playoff time. They matter. And nowhere do I have to point other than in Green Bay, where Scotty Miller makes one of the biggest plays of the Aaron Rodgers era. If he doesn't score that touchdown, if Will Redmond just catches the arm punt interception that Tom Brady threw right to him, the Packers probably win the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers might still be a Green Bay Packer today. Jordan Love is a Denver Bronco or something. Or Jordan Love is still the quarterback and Aaron Rodgers is retired, maybe. I don't know. But they might win the Super Bowl if Scotty Miller doesn't make that play in the NFC Championship game. Wide receiver 3. Depth matters, and the Packers have it. And there just aren't that many other teams that have it. And it is essential. It is essential because injuries happen. We know that. And if you're a top-heavy team, you are more susceptible to injuries than anybody else. All right, back tomorrow. Much more here on Locked On Packers. We're going to get some interviews this week. Very excited about that. So stay with us. We are still doing 5 shows a week. It is June. Things are slowing down, so we'll have some weeks here, maybe toward the end of June, early July, where we're going to maybe just do 3 or 4 shows. But I know that you guys want the content because you are sickos. You're here on a defensive line video podcast, wherever you're listening. And we appreciate you. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast. iTunes, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us on our YouTube page, you can do that. Go subscribe. We're on our YouTube page so you can stay Locked On Packers.